Before today's episode, I want to disclose our stance on the tragic events of the 22nd of September 2016. The team at the Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast continue to remain completely non-biased and impartial. We chose to air this episode to give one person's perspective of what happened that fateful day. We also reached out to other members of this story to give them the same opportunity and platform we gave Ian Leavers. Lastly, we would really like to thank you all for your opinions to this story after watching this episode. So please do comment and get in touch because your thoughts matter too. Thanks again, and let's watch this tragic episode. This week's episode is sponsored by Sorb Events Limited. They provide Sorb football, battle tag archery, UV dodgeball, sports days events, inflatable assault courses, plus many more activities coming soon. Ideal for sports teams, presentations, birthday parties, stag and hen parties, corporate events, school and half-term summer camps, any occasions. Give them a follow and use the code The Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast for 10% off your first booking. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast with Tony Morell. Welcome to the Good, the Bad and the Ugly podcast with me, Tony Morell, and this week's special guest is Ian Leavers. Really looking forward to you sharing the good, the bad and the ugly with us, Ian. How are we, mate?
Yeah, good, Tony. And firstly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come up here today to share my story, which I'm going to hopefully over the next hour, 2 hours, give you factual evidence as to why I say my story is the biggest miscarriage of justice this country has ever seen. Far bigger than the Guildford 4, Birmingham 6, and even the recent Andrew Malkinson story, which we've all heard this year.
And appreciate you travelling from where you've travelled from, Nottinghamshire, Newark, I think it is. And I just want to say thank you. Obviously, we spoke a little bit on the phone, via WhatsApp and stuff and all that. And listen, I know you've got a very, very powerful story. Like I say, with all our guests, I just want to start from where you grew up, where you're from, family life and school life and stuff.
Sure, yeah. I'm from the village of Selston, which is on the borders. It's Nottinghamshire, but on the borders of Derbyshire, which is what you probably get from my dialect. It's a broad Derbyshire accent. My father's family were all farmers, which I followed, and my dad also had a meat and poultry wholesale business, which is where I learned the meat trade. My mother's side, the Shinfields, they're all boxing family in around Alfreton. My granddad was a boxer and his brother, and the family still continues to this day with a boxing gym in Alfreton, which is in Derbyshire. And so, yeah, I grew up in Selston, farmer's son, went to the local junior school in Bagthorpe, and then to the senior school, which was called the Matthew Holland Comprehensive School in Selston.
You have brothers and sisters? Or
I've got two sisters. One's 4 years older than me, and one's 5 years younger.
Yeah, so you all went to school at different ages or same age?
I beg your pardon?
Was you all the same age or were you different ages?
Oh, my oldest sister, she was, when I went to senior school, she was in the last year. Then she left and I went through school. And from there, when I went to the comprehensive school at the age of 11, that's when I first glanced my future wife. And I do remember writing on my pencil case, because she was a year older than me at school, ILLGR, which was Ian Leavers loves Gillian Richards. My sister saw this on my pencil case and worked it out, which embarrassed me at that time. I went through school and I met my wife after leaving school in one of our local pubs. She'd been working up in the Lake District doing silver service, and she'd come back home. She was homesick, and we met up, and we've been together ever since.
Oh, you've obviously from secondary school and into your nearly 20s. You obviously met, and it was from there on you became husband and wife. Was that?
That's correct. Yeah.
Early on, was that you married from early on?
We did. Yes. I mean, I've always been We was engaged actually, and I was just turned 21, and Gillian was 22, and I've always been against drugs. You know, I'm an healthy guy. I've always taken my vitamins, minerals. My mother taught me from a young age to do this, from taking junior vitamins and adults, and with cod liver oil and everything else you need to stay healthy. So I've led a very healthy lifestyle. I've always eaten clean. I've never eaten junk food. So on this note, I told my girlfriend at the time, my fiance at the time, to stop taking the pill. I wasn't happy what pill perhaps could do to her in later times. And so she got caught, and my dad being my dad, shotgun wedding, although I was engaged, and obviously I loved her dearly. We got married, and in the May, and I think that was 84, and along came Lance in the September.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got 2 children, and then Laura came along another 3 years after that.
So you've always been from the Newark area, and obviously you've got 2 children.
I'm in Newark now, Tony. I was at that time. Stelston's more the other side, more Alfreton, Mansfield way.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so Newark's a little bit further out.
You got 2 children, do you say Lance and...
Lance and Laura.
Yeah, and there's 3 years difference between them,
There is, yes.
So, obviously, your business going, you know, was it from your father, or was it a family business?
Yeah, my dad's always been a pig farmer, and I did fall out with my dad just after leaving school. I did work for him, and I went to work at the local Dairy Crest site, where my job there was to sample the tankers that was collecting the milk from the local farms. They did a milk round, if you like, with the tankers. They'd come into the dairy twice a day, and it was my role to take a sample on arrival and take it to the laboratory to test, to make sure farmers weren't putting water in to their milk to get paid, because they're being paid pence per litre. And that was my job, to police that. And then I used to take them over to the unloading bay and couple their pipe onto a pump and empty the tankers. And after that, it was my job to climb the ladder of the tanker, use the hose pipe, and wash in it, which is very relevant to what I'm going to come on to later.
Yeah, well, we'll touch on that a little bit later, which
sure.
I'm sure we'll get on to.
Yeah.
So the business, was it a family business, did you say? And
yeah, my dad farmed, and so after that, his friend's farm come up for sale. He was retiring in Mansfield, and my dad bought that farm actually, and wife and I, then we were married, we went over there, and I started keeping pigs there, which we grew the business. And then from there, I purchased the site near Bottisford, which is in Leicestershire, where the incident had occurred, what we're going to talk about later. And then I rented another farm up at Bawtry. And so at that time, I had around about 6,000 pigs. And we were destocking the farm at Mansfield when an incident occurred there, which led to all sorts of problems with keeping pigs. At that time, I was very busy building the business, trading, which what I came on to later with the green feeds. I was out there traveling the whole country. There was no reason for this because I worked for myself, but I always averaged 35,000 miles per annum traveling the country, and I dealt with factories like from up here, if you like. I had contracts with like Heinz, Boddington in Manchester, Meadow Foods down here in Chester, Joseph Ehlers in Nantwich, JW Lee's used to take their yeast, and one or two others, the one up at Samlesbury. Yeah, so I was a very busy man.
And it was just pig feed that you...
That was at that time I used to collect the liquids and dry feeds such as bread and cakes, and collect such if it was yeast, I would take it direct to a farm and they'd use the yeast, the liquid yeast, as a protein source to formulate with the wheat or barley to make a ration, a wet feed ration. They'd then put in their vitamins and made a porridge for them, and they'd pipeline feed their pigs, or it could be milk from the dairies up here, or yogurts. I used to do a lot of work with Arla Foods and the dairy in Withamshire, I think it was. And so, yeah, that's what I was doing. I was collecting at that time single products and taking it direct to farm. And so what happened from there, a nutritionist came to me and came up with the idea of making more of an high energy feed, more of a complete feed that we worked on together. And that's where the business then started, the green feeds business from Bottisford. And we started that and we grew it month on month, year on year. And we were very successful supplying the largest pig farms with a porridge feed.
Just in the UK, was that?
Just in the UK. It was all part of the organisation, like you see the Red Tractor. I was part of FEMAS. So auditors used to come to me and do all their a two-day audit to ensure everything was in place. And yeah, that's what I did. I was selling this porridge as against, if you like, for people to understand, if such as wheat was, and it's 87% dry matter, and it was £87 a tonne. I'm selling it for £1%. My role was to make a better product than wheat, but sell it cheaper to farmers. And so I'd also looked for dairy products to put into the blend, such as yogurts, milks, creams, this sort of thing, because you can't beat for a pig. A pig's very much like a human being, and they're slaughtered at 100 kilos, and they might be less than 6 months old. And so you want them to grow as quickly as you can. And if you can get dairy into the diet with all the amino acids such as lysine, pigs, excuse the pun, they flew on this feed. And so I was selling energy, but the farmers was getting added value with dairy in that complete blend that I was selling. So we'd look after a local factory near to me in Newark, and I would be taking cream cakes, profiteroles, this sort of thing. And there could be 100, 150 tonne a week coming out of that factory with dairy in there. I'd also built over the years, starting from the 80s into the 90s, designing and building recycling machinery, which would take contents from their packaging, such as yogurts and milks, and would use those products and then would recycle the plastics. And I was at the forefront of this. And in fact, in round about 1993, 1994, there was only one company in the country that was taking the contents from tins, and that was Heinz up here at Kit Green. And I went up and looked at the machinery they was using, and I had built similar. And there was this machine actually. There was also one in Tetley on Trafford Park, and they was taking tea leaves out of tea bags, recycling the tea leaf, and then moving the tea bags on for recycling themselves. Yeah.
So obviously you were a very busy business. Was you 24/7? Was you just flat out all the time?
24/7. I never stopped. My business would, over the years, work even on Christmas Day. We've had drivers go out when dairy's on surplus. From over the holidays, Christmas period, you used to get a lot of surplus milk, and we'd work Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and tanker to farms. But of course, even with my feed, pigs need to eat, and so you would top up their tanks before Christmas, but you'd find over the holidays, you've got to come in. Factories started back up immediately after Christmas. They'd have, maybe some factories have a couple of days off. And so it was a living, breathing machine that was always working 24/7. I had tankers going out in the evenings, through the day, Saturdays, Sundays, you name it.
So members of staff, you had a good, good fleet.
Well, back in the early days, we built it up. As I say, I had the two people that are part of what we're talking about, and they were the Maruniak family. I employed Dave Maruniak and his son, Mike Maruniak, who later become onto the yard manager. So at the formulation of making this animal feed, look, they worked hard. and they moved over from the pig farms, and they were the ones that was making this product for me that we built year on year and successfully sold throughout the UK.
So these people worked with you from basically from the start.
The family moved over from Bagthorpe, from near where we're from. My wife was from Underwood House, from Selston. They moved over with the farm and moved over to the Grantham area back in the mid-90s. And at the outset of making the finished feed, there were just them two people that made the product and did a great job doing it.
Yeah. Now, obviously, Ian, your story, what we're going to get onto now. I mean, look, 22nd of December 2016, a day that would change everybody's lives. Two men sadly, tragically lost their lives at Greenfeeds. Can you tell us your version of events and what actually happened that day?
I can, and I'm going to. But firstly, I do need to touch on this because, look, people don't know how we feel. Two men sadly lost their lives, and they did work. And
respect to the family, you know what I mean?
Full respect, which is what I'm saying here. Look, at the end of the day, I know, and this is the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. I know this had nothing to do with my company, and it was another reason unknown, that we all need to know. Everyone in this country, worldwide, needs to know what happened in the mixing shed that night, because I have the CCTV footage. It is the Bible. It can't lie. And there's been a lot of lies told and perjury committed. But look, coming back to the two deceased, it breaks my heart. And my wife is the kindest woman in the world, and she is absolutely in bits over this. Well, it doesn't matter how they died. They died on my premises, and they worked for me. And my heart goes out to the families. It really does. There's not a day doesn't go by when I don't especially think of Nathan, because his little boy, his girlfriend, was expecting, and she had a son, I believe, exactly at the same time as I had the birth of my grandson. He was nearly 7, and it reminds me every day. I didn't know Gavin, although he did work for me. I'd not met him. Mike Maruniak was the yard manager, and he set Nathan and Gavin on, actually. He was in charge of the yard, but I did know Gavin quite well, and it was a tremendous lad. He was a very funny lad. He was a lovely person, and he had a very special relationship with my wife. They were close, and Gillian helped Gavin out in many ways. And yeah, all I can say is they're close. And so, again, I just want to say, look, we're very sorry for this, and our hearts do go out to the families.
Yeah.
Even though they are hearing my grievances now, I have to do this. At the end of the day, two men have sadly lost their lives. Yeah. But I know there has been a grave miscarriage of justice here. We have been framed, in my opinion. The CCTV is going to prove this.
And this is why I want you to, obviously, as best you can, with what, what's actually gone on and where we're at now, and to give your version of events and what you can.
Well, I'm going to talk you through that tragic day. I'd been up here on Bolton doing business with Craig Lavelle. People up in the northwest will know him. Lavelle's got skips around the area. A successful man. He's been in the recycling business all his life. Now I'd had a meeting with Craig, and I'd driven back down, and I got back home and quickly got changed, and I went to the gym, the local gym, my friend's gym in Newark. And I've always said to everyone, all my friends know this, that if you can't find an hour a day to go to the gym, something's wrong, because fitness, keeping fit, working out, you name it, whatever sport it is, I believe it will give you longevity of life, and hence the reason I do it. I want to be fit, I want to be healthy. So anyway, I got quickly changed, and ironically, it was actually at the very same time that the incident occurred that I pulled up into the car park, and I did. My phone did just ring, and it was my daughter, and I thought, well, I'll ring you when I come out of the gym. So I did my workout, got out there 5:30ish, and I rang my daughter, and that's when the bombshell hit me, and it just broke me down. She told me that Gavin and Nathan had died in a tank, and I was coming through London Road in Newark, and I turned immediately left to go up. I'd got my gym gear on, and I went up Beacon Hill and got onto the A1, and I just broke down. And I actually thought that they'd fallen into a mixing tank and been chopped up. That's what I thought.
Is that what you first thought?
Of course it was, because I couldn't imagine anything else. You know, what's happened since and what people have said in statements and changed statements year on year is what led us to where we were last year and found guilty. But I'm going to talk the way through that. And so I arrived at site. My drive down to my office is about a quarter of a mile long, and there was blue lights flashing all the way up the drive. I told the office at the top I was, and so I drove down the drive and went through the main doors into the foyer. There was people all stood there, and you can see there was all in shock, it was all distraught. I went upstairs and opened the boardroom door, and in there was my wife and son Lance with police officers. And I went over to my wife, and it's all on body cam. The police had their body cams turned on, which is absolutely fine.
Normal procedure.
Normal procedure. In the offices, they didn't give us warning for this. And again, that's perfectly fine with me. Nothing to hide. And it's all captured on the body cam where my wife just breaks down crying and we have a hug. The policemen do just nip out for a few moments and then come back in. So on body cam then, we sit down and I asked Lance actually, my son, there was two rescuers, but he's the main rescuer. And I am his father, and I am going to say this before I go on to it. My son, what he did that night, I believe he should have a bravery award, because he didn't know what he was going to lead himself into when he got into that tank. And he did selflessly, and the police officer recognised that next day. But anyway, I asked Lance, it got to the point, and it's on the body cam. I said to Lance, what tank was he in, Lance? And he said a road tank it had. Well, it's captured, but the shock to what were they doing up in there? I could not. Could you imagine?
Would that not be a normal procedure?
That's never been a procedure ever. Nobody has ever been in a tanker. Never. Well, we say this. There was one occasion in 2011, and please remind me, because through mental health, I just want to know where we stop now, and I just want to give you something from 2011. Look, ashamedly, I did commit adultery, and in 2011, I built, from my other older officers, I turned them into a log cabin in the yard, and I did split up with Gillian for a brief period, and it was in this period which I was, because then I'm living in the yard for a matter of months, and it was one Saturday that I was in the log cabin, and Sam Pepper, who was one of my old drivers that used to work for me 15 years before when I was farming, used to come to another animal feed manufacturer next door to me to collect chicken feed. And he'd come down to our house to see Dave and Mike and collect maybe some breadcrumbs or something to make his diet for his chickens. And on this particular Saturday, Tim Walker was recommissioning a tanker that is quite important to all of this, called the Green Goddess. And it's equally as important to Gordon, which the two men sadly died in. But anyway, Tim Walker was recommissioning this tanker because it had been off the road for a number of years, and it had blend in it before. And as we never went into tankers to wash them, you can imagine, like if you make a smoothie in the morning like I do, people see what I'm doing. I've given them examples of this on TikTok and Facebook. Use a blender, you make your porridge, whatever it is. And if you empty that and you don't wash it out, it's going to dry a crust on the side. It says. So you've got a thin crust on the side. So Tim had put this pump, and Sam had given him a lift onto the tanker to put this pump on. Unbeknown to me, because I'm no business been in the yard Saturday afternoon. I'm just watching the football or whatever I was doing, and I got a knock on the door, and Sam came to the door, and it was with Dave Maruniak, and he said, "Ian, I've given Tim a lift with this pump on the tanker, and I've cleaned tanker out for thee." I said, "What do you mean you've cleaned tanker out for me, Sam?" He said, well, I've got to book it because it had dried. There was a little crust on the base of the tanker that had dropped down off the side. I scripted. I said, Sam, we don't go in tankers. Now, for you to understand, Tone, you could have easily, with that's on the base of that tank, used a jet wash from the front of the tanker. The lid was right at the front of the Green Goddess. Climbed up the ladder, put a hose pipe in. It would soak it, and it would come out. And that's what
normal procedure.
That's the normal procedure. Nobody had ever in a tanker before. And so after the deaths, I told my solicitor about this, and he told the police. And so anyway, we've got Lance, and he's just told me that they've died in a tanker. And so then I want to talk what happened that day. And so the driver of the vehicle, Gordon the tanker, and Richard Draycott had been out to make a delivery that day to a farm in Oxford. And we used to carry, on average, around about approximately 28 tons per load. And he'd got back into the yard at approximately 3 o'clock, the very same time my wife arrived back at the yard after visiting graves around Nottinghamshire. Firstly, she'd been to my best friend who was like my brother, Andy Harwood. He died in the September that year. His stent failed, God bless him. And we had a picnic bench put up near Bevercoats, near Ollerton, and she took flowers to Andy. She then drove over to Mansfield Crematorium to take flowers to 2 other of my best friends, Kev Brewman and James McBride. She then drove over from there to Underwood Church, where we're from, to take flowers to my grandparents and both their parents. And then she went on to Greasley Church to my nephew's grave, who sadly died at the age of 17 in a car accident. And so she then only decided that she would go into work that day because she had no reason to be working at the business apart from looking overall everything to ensure Ian Leavis's money is safe.
Is that what your wife's role was?
That's what my wife's role was only. No other purpose to do anything else within that business. That year, 2016, I'd sat on Stuart Brown, the transport general manager, who was an operations director for Wayfeeds, a massive company. He used to look after 70 men and 42 tankers. I had 5 at any one time on the road. So in his own words, you know, he had his slippers on that day. Actually, he said it was a doddle. So there's a man. You've got 5 trucks, a transport manager looking after 5 trucks. Now, anybody up and down the country hearing this that's involved in transport would know that's absolute walk in the park. And so he did get involved with Mike Maruniak, who was the yard manager. You know, he talked to Mike of what loads was going to be made, and he run the yard with him.
Running under the yard.
Look, so you got 2 people doing that. So, look, for people to understand, at that time, drivers and yard staff, we had built up the numbers, and let's say we'd got around about 30 staff. So I've got a full-time yard manager, I've got a full-time transport manager, I've got a full-time accountant working for me at that time. He was Aaron Shelley, who was actually learning the role also when Stuart was off to take control of everything, because Aaron was going to step into my role as managing director. Very intelligent man. So we've got a company accountant. I've got a full-time sales assistant, personal assistant, Alex Fortune, who I was very happy to let her go out to do any business around the country on my behalf because she was that good. And Nicky Maruniak Johnson, who did do the health and safety and FEMA. So you can imagine the team I'd got, and my son, Lance, in the office, who's a director. So I've just named a lot of people there.
Like a bit of a workforce there.
So what purpose was there for my wife? Now, Nicky Maruniak herself made the organisation chart, and it had Ian Leavis at the top with an arrow coming down to me, to Stuart Brown, over to Mike Maruniak, down to the drivers and the yard staff. My wife, she was in a box on the far left-hand corner with no arrows to her and no arrows away. And it simply said accounts. So that was my wife's role in the business. And so I want to come back to what Richard Draycott did there, but I just want to also add, while we're talking about the organisation chart, just before the trial in 2022, I believe it was March, I was asked to go to the Birmingham offices of my solicitors to look at an organisation chart that the prosecution had put together. So I say this is fabricating evidence. I'll let the listener decide what this is, because I was presented a chart and asked if I recognised it, where the prosecution had put together an organisation chart with Ian Leavis at the top, with an arrow coming down from me to my wife under me, then an arrows from my wife to everyone else. So I claim they fabricated evidence.
And that was never put together by yourselves? Or
Never. I didn't recognise it. I told my solicitors. And so I hope now the people that's listening to this and see this will understand where this was going. If the prosecution were, if you like, wanting to fabricate evidence that we could see here, what else was they willing to do? So anyway, let's go back to it. So
that day, obviously, we're going to go back to that.
Let's go back to that day. So we've got my son's done this. So now I'm going to go to what I've heard, and mine's hearsay. So I've heard now what happened. So Richard Draycott comes in the office. He's been on the Weybridge, and he's got out of his cab. We'll cover later what about him. We'll come back to that. He's got out of his cab, and he's come into the office, and he's having a fallout at approximately 3 o'clock with Stuart Brown, the general manager, transport manager, claiming that the blend had set like concrete. It's a porridge mix. It can't set like concrete. It claimed that he'd only got 22 tons off, and he'd come back with 6 tons on his tanker. Now, I've asked, just as a side note, because there is CCTV showing the Weybridge, but you can't see it clear enough. I'm wondering, did he even have a wheel from the front of the lorry slightly off the Weybridge and actually come back with more? We don't know, but that's me. That's just my opinion. Don't know. So anyway, it's falling out with Stuart, and my wife has had enough of this because she's strong-minded, my wife. She's put me in my place many times. And so she piped up and said, Richard, it can't set like concrete.
Yeah.
This is impossible. And so she said something to Richard. She said, go down to the mixing shed. Now, this has never happened before because we've got CCTV showing the mixing shed. And she said, back the tanker into the mixing shed over the sleeping policeman. Now, this is at the front of the mixing shed. They normally load up the porridge from the back, from the pumps that load them when they empty and take the porridge away to farmers. So she's told him to back it into the mixing shed over the sleeping policeman, open the free flow valve, put the jet wash up there because he said it's set like concrete. Now, the free flow valve is like pulling your plug of your bath. It's not to a pump. It's just into the tanker. Yeah. So you pull. So, like, let's just say the valve itself is like the plug. So she said, if you like, pull the plug, then put the jet wash up there to see what comes out. She then said, then climb up top and wash in it. Now, you remember what I've just told you about my job at Dairy Crest? My girlfriend at the time, Gillian, when I was working there, used to pick me up. The car park where she used to wait for me had full view of what I was doing. And my last job was to climb up the ladders of the tankers and wash in it. So that's why my wife said that, to get some water into the tanker, because he said it would set like concrete, to allow it to become moist again to come out. If they'd have rang me and said this to me at this point, I'd have just got Richard and said, what are you talking about, man? Just go around and load up. You're talking tripe. But anyway, they tried to be helpful, and that's my wife trying to be helpful. So that's what she said. So what we know now is, and we've got CCTV footage of absolutely everything. So from the camera that I've put on there for everyone to see worldwide, it's on TikTok, it's on Facebook. I'm hoping it's shared around the world, and actually President Putin's actually viewing this, and President Biden. And so we've got a clip now, which I've not shared, and there's the Manitou on the same CCTV camera, what's captured, what I've shared. And at 4 o'clock, you've got stood around this Manitou, Richard Draycott, identified in blue overalls. He's actually took the stand and confirmed this. You've got Nigel Curtis, the other driver. He's got a Viz waistcoat on. And then you've got Dave Maruniak and Mike Maruniak. Dave Maruniak, father of Mike Maruniak's the yard manager, approximately 4 o'clock. they've got the big yard workers' coats on. You see them fluorescent. So Richard Draycott's actually named them. But anyway, let's go back to what we know. So let's now talk about what Richard Draycott says happened, because that's what my wife's told him to do. So now we need to analyse what Richard said and what he said under oath. So he's come to court and he said this under oath. He's actually, in his words, it had set like concrete, and so he went round and he said that he backed it into the mixing shed, and as soon as he got out his cab, he said Nathan sat on the top, dangling his legs in the tank. So, meaning that he's opened the lid, opened the wing nuts of the lid, lifted the lid up, and he's sat with his legs in. Now, immediately, any driver of any truck, commercial vehicle in this country will think, well, something's wrong here, because he's responsible for his vehicle while he's got his tacho in.
You're in charge of what
you're in charge of your vehicle.
Yeah.
I hope some traffic commissioners are listening to this also and seeing this, because they'll understand this. Because I'm perturbed as to why the police never investigated Richard Draycott at all.
If that was, this is just my opinion, if I was driving that truck, someone was climbing on my truck, I'd be saying,
get down.
Get the fuck down, you know what I mean? And whatever, but that's just my opinion. You know
I'm
what I mean?
hoping it's the opinion of the world. But anyway, so in his own words, and he's said this and it's been clarified, that he then got the pressure washer hose and passed it up to him. So he's not doing what my wife suggested to him.
Why is the driver not doing the job?
Well, not only that, Tone, why? Why is he not thinking, what are you doing, mate? You've got liquid in there. We don't know the depth of it. And not only that, it's pitch black in these tankers. You couldn't see the hand in front of you. So what's he doing, allowing him? What's actually happening here? Because it's blown me away. To this day, I still don't understand. And all we all want to know is what happened in the mixer shed that night. So in his own words then, he said he dropped in. So what happened then, Richard? He said, well, he went quiet. So I banged on the tank. Well, surely you know what liquid you've got on. This material is high energy, lots of fats in there, very slippy. It's a porridge, it's like quicksand. If you've dropped into that, you've been pulled under, or you not be able to stand up, because your feet's going to keep going under you, and you're going to drown.
No alarm raised when he's dropped into the tank?
Well, he said then that he went round the back of the tanker, climbed up the ladder, and he actually said that Nathan, God bless him, was hanging onto the lid with his gloves. He said he went to grab one glove and he fell out, went to grab the other glove. And he said he was not responsive. He said he just went face down into the product and drowned him. And so, in his own words then, he said he came down the ladder and he comes out to the mixing shed. As he, in his words, and this, I've never understood this one. He says, because he knew Nigel was in the vicinity, which we can see on the CCTV footage that I've shared. He's the guy with the yellow visco. Because he was going for him, because he knew he was a driver. Well, I still to this day don't understand what a driver or a yard worker or a soldier or a policeman is any different to someone who's a rescuer. So he says, when he come out of the mixing shed, at this point, a Manito was driving down the yard with Gavin in it, and Richard's apparently waving his arms, and Gavin stops the Manito and says, "What's up, mate?" And Richard's own word says this: "Nathan's in a tank." Now, wouldn't you think, on saying this, if it was common practice, normal practice, he'd have just carried on what he was doing? But then Richard says that Gavin pulls the Manito up. Bearing in mind, you can all see this with the CCTV that I've shared, the proximity of Nigel's tanker, where Nigel is, and where he claims Gavin is. Well, here's the thing. It's not Richard coming out the mixing shed. And this is why I'm happy to come on here tonight and actually say the names, the real names, rather than other names that I put in my book.
And I know you've already disclosed them, and I just don't want you to be getting into any trouble, but obviously...
Yeah, I'm quite happy, Tone, and I don't want you to get into trouble putting this on too. We're not, because I'm telling the truth, and only the truth. My story is truth, it's fact. These are what's been said in court. The transcript's there for, I hope any lawyer in this country will look at this, what's said, and they will support what I'm saying now. Yeah. So he says that he sees Gavin, and this all happens. Well, let me tell you, at this point, what we see it's not Richard coming out of the mixing shed. It's Dave Maruniak. And why can I say it's Dave Maruniak? Richard named him in the earlier clip stood around this fort truck. He named him. So Richard's taken the oath, and then he's points at the TV screen and said, "That's not me. That's not me." Now, firstly, there's no Manito with Gavin on. Secondly, it's not Richard. Thirdly, he's just said twice it's not him on the TV screen. Now, I'm actually, at this point, I'm thinking, Judge, stop this trial. Why? Why are we carrying on? How can we, and I'm asking you this one now, how can you have a Crown Court trial? And it was my first time in Crown Court, where you've got the people at the scene where 2 men have died, drowned in a tank, and it's not that person. What is going on?
From obviously when, sadly, the gentleman have climbed in the tank, and was there an alarm raised? Was there anything?
So I'll carry on. Alarm raised, and so he said this, and then mysteriously is dismissed. It told the defence that it wasn't him. I'm confused why the defence didn't actually raise this with the judge. I don't know the procedures in Crown Court trials. But, well, I'm telling a lie. It's now the prosecution's turn to stand up and ask him questions. And on the first day, it was a young lady, the prosecution barrister. And so let's turn the TV off. We don't want to look at the TV. That's nasty. That's telling the truth. And so she's very sweet. She's only about 5 foot if she's that. So she said, "And so, Richard, what happened when you got to the office to raise the alarm?" So here we go, guys. Without going into mass amount of detail, we've turned off factual evidence, and now we're going to go on to Jack and Ori, let's tell a story. And so Richard then says, "Well, I got to the office door. You talked through about fetching Nigel, which it's not, so we might as well not talk about it. Got to the office door and everything led from there." So we can get to that later. And so I'm thinking, what the hell is going on here? The TV's been turned off. Richard's
CCTV on and all, is that way?
The TV, yeah, all of that now is turned off. The prosecution the police never used it for no identification purpose, which I'll come on to later in my police interviews. So let's just continue with the trial as it goes. So the prosecution don't want to use the CCTV. They don't want to identify no one. They just want now to go to a story. So here's the thing. We've had the narrative, and a lot of people have hurled abuse at me. Well, they're not actually now. It's just a few, a handful. The overwhelming amount of people get this. So they say these few. Well, no health and safety. So if we go with the prosecution story and what Richard's saying, well, how can we believe it? How can we believe that Nathan went round and dropped in? How can you when it's not him leaving the mixing shed? It's unsafe. All the evidence is unsafe. So you cannot believe it. So what she wanted him to say is a story. So I'm there nearly breaking my fingers behind the glass. I can't speak. So we then move on to Nigel Curtis, his mate, who we can see on the CCTV, that is apparently coming to fetch. So now it's his turn to give evidence. And so let's just get to the point where he said he's doing what he's doing now. At 4 o'clock, it's 20 minutes before we know the tanker backed in and they were drowning. Before Mike Maruniak leaves site, because he leaves at 4 o'clock to go Christmas shopping, he's seen around this fort truck passing something to Nigel Curtis. Nigel Curtis then moves over to the conifers, and everyone looking at the CCTV footage that I've put on TikTok and Facebook will see this. He moves over to the conifers. I've not shared this, by the way. And he's doing this business. His hand to mouth. The defence ask him, "Are you smoking, Nigel?" "No, I don't smoke." Well, I knew this, but whenever he came into the yard, because the designated smoking area was up near the officers at the paddock, if Alex was ever having a cigarette break, he'd always go over and, what I say is, he'd latch with her. He'd always be stood with her while she had a fag. But he didn't smoke. And so is denied smoking, which I'd question because if you look at the CCTV footage, you can see something coming from his mouth. I say it's smoke and he's doing that motion. He can't be doing nothing else. So it comes to the point now where Richard's apparently coming out of the mixing shed running to collect him. And it's put to him that it's not Richard. And he just grabs hold of the dot lights and he's sweating profusely and says, I'm telling you it's Richard. Well, it's not. And I can sit here today, very confident, saying it's not. So what are the jury thinking at this point? They're confused. They've got to be confused. How can this conviction ever be safe when you've got the first two witnesses, one saying it's him, one saying it's not? We all know who it is because Richard's named them round the fork truck. So it then goes on. We'll let him carry on and his talk down to what happened. So he says, Richard fetched him, which it's not. And he goes round the tanker and he climbs up and he actually uses the torch of his phone to look in. But he says something very odd. He says, I couldn't get in to try to save them because I had no ladder. Well, Richard Draycott, before he come off the stand, he says that when he went back with Nigel went up, he says, and he went to his cab to get a strap. Well, what good would a strap be when his story, his events, what he's said, that Nathan's gone flat out down? And not only that, we've now got Gavin in. When he got to the office door, he said, so how did he know Gavin's in? Because of the proximity where they were. But anyway, he says he got a strap and he threw it up to Nigel. Now, I've only just picked this up this year. There is a strap on the photo. Everybody can see it. It's in all the newspapers. And it's wrapped around this pipe tube. Lots of times. And it goes up and it's in the tank. And here's the thing, Nigel Curtis never mentions this strap at all. That he's got nothing to get in. But Richard's saying he threw him a strap and there's a strap in there. But Nigel doesn't mention it. I say this. That strap was in there before Nigel was taken back to the tanker of Dave Maruniak. And in the shock and everything that's happening, he just doesn't mention this strap.
By this time, while all this is going on, on the day, is there nobody, emergency services? Has people been alerted? What's the score?
Well, we can go now with what we didn't know until the trial, the length of time that there was left in there before they actually are spotted on CCTV coming out of the mixing shed. And so let me tell you, because Richard said, when he backed in the tanker, all this happened, what I've just explained to you, within less than a minute. And so now we've got the CCTV camera. We know when he backed in. So now we can start to time it to how long it took for someone actually to come out of the mixing shed to raise the alarm up at the office. And let me tell you, Richard Draycott actually, when he's seen for the very first time coming out of the mixing shed, it's 11 minutes and 33 seconds. And so he's in the mixing shed all this time, but I say actually he's in his cab, but we know Jack Maruniak's in the mixing shed, and I'll come on to him later, but 11 minutes and 33 seconds when you see Richard Draycott for the first time come out of the mixing shed. And now when he comes out, he's pulling his overalls on. So earlier, when we'd got him on the stand, the barristers, first of all, when he got out of his cab at the weighbridge, he's pulling his overalls on. And he confirmed this is what he does when he gets out his cab. So I say this. When he's seen on 11 minutes and 33 seconds, he just got out of his cab, in my opinion. And he didn't know what the hell was going off with that tanker. In my opinion, everything he said is lies. And he'd been made aware, whatever was happening in there, because we know Dave Maruniak's in there. We know Jack Maruniak's in there. We know Nigel's in there. And then there's the pink parrot lorry outside. He's there. And Gavin and Nathan. So I say that Richard didn't know. And he's coming out. So on 11 minutes, 33 seconds, when he gets to the office door, now here's the thing. In the statement that he made to my solicitor in 2017, it says this when he got to the office door. Gavin and Nathan's in a tank. Dave Maruniak's up at the office door at this time because he's run out of the back of the mixing shed. When he took the oath, he wasn't there, but we'll come on to him. He says in his first police statement that when Richard got to the office door, he said, someone's in a tank. Someone, and Richard Draycott's first statement, Gavin and Nathan, was miles apart. Richard's first police statement, I believe, said Nathan's in a tank. But everyone in the office said he said Gavin's in a tank. And then his later police statement says Gavin, but he makes an explanation as to why he said Gavin's in a tank. Bearing in mind, I've just told you that it's apparently Nathan, and I'm getting confused by this point. It should be Nathan in a tank. Now he puts this in his statement. He said Gavin's in a tank because he knew he would be, because when he got back with Nigel, but it's not him, remember, and it's all very within yards, feet together, that Gavin wasn't there. But why did he assume he was in a tank? I'll say it again, Jack and Ori's story. Because, let me tell you, you can see Dave Maruniak and Nigel go back to the mixing shed. But it was all there was feet apart from where Gavin is. But we've got to forget all this with the...
While these lads are in the tank.
We've got to forget all what Richard said, because there's no Manito there. There's no Gavin there. So it's rubbish, isn't it? So his statement says Gavin. Dave Maruniak said he said someone. His first interview to my solicitor said Gavin and Nathan. It's all just Jack and Ori's story. We don't know who was in that tank first or why. Now, so we've had Richard Draycott, we've had Nigel Curtis. Let's come on to the next day now. I went home that night, on Monday night, thinking, what the hell is going on? Is this how Crown Court trials are carried out? That people aren't identified by the police. Bearing in mind, it was over 5.5 years when it went to court.
It took 5.5 years to get to court.
5.5 years.
From the tragic date.
Yeah. So what was going off? Nobody's been identified. So Dave Maruniak, when he comes on the Tuesday morning, bearing in mind Richard and Nigel's gone home that night and said, hey, you're using CCTV. Because in all them years before, the police haven't used it for them to identify each other. They didn't know that we got the CCTV. And so here's the thing. Dave Maruniak now comes in, and it comes to the point again where he's shown the CCTV of him coming out of the mixing shed for Nigel Curtis. And he says this, he says, no, it can't be me. I was unloading a lorry around the back where there's no CCTV. Well, it is him. And agreed facts on the Wednesday, the next day, by the police, agreed facts meaning the police have agreed this. There's no such lorry on site.
No log. No
yes, we've got. We've got the CCTV now, which I want to come on to in a bit. Please remind me how we checked after the trial, because we only had 2 hours footage for the trial. But anyway, so he's denied it being him. His son, the yard manager, Mike Maruniak, on the Tuesday afternoon, when he's taken the oath and he looks at the TV screen, he says, it can't be my dad, because he's unloading a lorry around the back where there's no CCTV. Now, he's the yard manager. Now, he knows all the movements of vehicles that come on and off the site. That's his job.
Yeah.
But he's left at 4 o'clock, and there's no lorry that he's claiming his dad's unloading. And so we've now got 4 people that have all taken the oath and have all lied after taking the oath. And so now I'm in bits.
Surely that way, and what you're saying there, somebody's saying there's a vehicle on site, you'll have documentation or records or...
Yeah, of course. No such vehicle. The police agreed it. That means agreed facts.
So
no vehicle.
How's that not standing up in court if there's no... this and it's not that, that's just me looking from the outset. I'm not taking anyone's side, by the way,
No, not at all. I'm confused.
What I'm looking at and when you see things, it proves that there's nothing on, no documentation, or there's, you're saying there is on site, and that's the procedure you fill in, on most places,
everything's logged.
Transport and stuff like that.
How can we charge or how can we pay for products if we... there's no
booking in or
there's no booking in. There's no lorry there. So Dave Maruniak, before we go on to the third day, let's just stick there a little bit. So he claims that he wasn't there. Now, let me tell you this. He's spotted running out of the back door of the mixer shed where there's no CCTV after he's gone in with Nigel Curtis minutes later. And he's running up the back way, and he's spotted by Jake Welch, who was a builder at the time, building some new workshops out the back. And he needed to collar Dave to give him his van keys back. He'd been out that day with Will Murray to collect a piano for my son for a Christmas present. So they'd used Dave's van, and they'd dropped the piano off at Lance's house, and to fit it where they had to in his house, they took a sofa away. And it was in the back of Dave's van. So Jake collared him as he was running up and gave him his van keys back. Now, Dave Maruniak's first police statement, and although he'd been in the police car sat there for at least 2 hours, was all on being half a page long, and the police had spread it out into lines, actually. It wasn't tied, it had only been a paragraph. But he says this, why he's at the office door, somewhere where he doesn't come very often, but he wasn't very sociable. He says that he was there talking about a private matter about his van. Why couldn't he just explain that Jake had just given him his keys back and he was running up from the back of the mixing shed? So he had to leave that as being very mysterious, talking about a private matter about his van. So that's him. We've covered Mike Maruniak. Now, day 3, it's Jack Maruniak's turn, the grandson. Now, let me tell you, he's in the mixing shed at the time Richard backs the tanker in. So you can imagine the pandemonium going on in there, right? He's in there. Wherever he is in there, I do not know, but he's there with them. What we know about Jack is, we've just said there, 11 minutes, 33 seconds when Richard comes out the mixing shed. On 11 minutes, Jack's seen running out the mixing shed, running up the yard. He looks in where Nigel's got his tank that you can see on the CCTV. And just at the side there, there's the can crushing shed. And he's doing this business. He's got his phone to his ear. And he slows down to look in the can crushing shed to make sure the Polish lads that was working on the can crushing plant didn't spot him. And he goes past that CCTV camera. Then there's another CCTV camera that shines across near the officers. That's the next one to pick you up. And he's not spotted on there. So he's not come to the office to raise the alarm on 11 minutes. He's on his phone. He's not ringing 999. He then disappears and hides somewhere. So he's now, because obviously they all know it's day 3, everybody knows now that we, the defence, are using the CCTV. The prosecution aren't for identifying no one, by the way, which we know. And so he's now asked to identify himself on the big screens in the Crown Court in Leicester. Now, these screens, these TV screens, are they 70, 80 inches big? I don't know. There's 2 of them that he could have looked at. One right near where he stood in the dock, is it? And one further down. And he refused, point blank, to look at the TV screen. The defence barrister, Dimagoras, was cross-examining him. Said, and I remember this distinctly, all in the transcript. Please, Mr. Maruniak, will you help us here? Will you look at the CCTV and to identify yourself? And he says, no, he turned his back. He said, I'm not looking at that. That's CCTV. Where's his words? Well, I say this because I've learned a lot about law since coming out of jail last year. I say he was hostile. And I say it was the judge's duty to have stopped trial at that point. He'd not done it on day 1. He'd not done it on day 2. Certainly, with this person who's hostile, he should have stopped the trial there and then.
He's the main man, the judge. Obviously, he calls the shots.
Yeah, he's the referee.
If someone's not, when you stand in that dock,
yeah,
or you take the stand, you've got to give your evidence or whatever it is, and decline.
Yeah, decline.
What was your barrister or defence? What would they say? Would they, in any other court, that would, is me guessing again. I'm not legally clued up to say, but I would think if you're not gonna do what I'm asking you, then get him out the court, or take him. Listen, you're being asked to look at something the 7th. He turned his back.
Yeah.
I think that's outrageous. I mean,
that's more than outrageous.
Just my opinion again.
Yeah, and these are my opinions too, Tony. I don't. My first time in a Crown Court trial, I don't know how these things work, but It made me so unhappy that I went into at lunchtime. I went into the court canteen and refused to move. I closed my eyes. Said, I'm not carrying on with this. This is not right. Because we've had the main people here now, and they've all told lies under oath. And I could see this going wrong, because after them, it was just the hearsay people. And so I closed my eyes, refused to move, and it was a junior solicitor and another solicitor from Kennedy that came and they coaxed me around and got me to continue with the trial. I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd have continued my protest at that point. And so, sticking with it now, so Draycott's, let's go Draycott now, and he's come to the office. Now, he's sounded the alarm. There's all these people down there at the scene, and we've not talked much about the Pink Parrot driver too, who's recently said in an email only a few months back to someone that's been helping me that Steve watched it all roll out. Okay? I've got that email. I've put it on Facebook. He watched it all roll out. Well, let me tell you this. The police never took a statement from him. His lorry's the white lorry you can see parked in front of Richard Draycott's lorry when he backed in the machine. It's there for everyone to see.
For me, I mean, such tragic circumstances, two and tragically lost their lives. Not an expert, but why is not everybody being, questioned for statements or who were on site that day? Why are people, like I say, I'm not an expert, but I certainly wouldn't think, you'd be questioning with what's going on. It's tragic. Two gentlemen have lost their lives. You know what I mean? And I just think under them circumstances, in any in any crime or whatever, if there's witnesses or people are there, surely to God they should be questioned, and surely to God they should have to give.
Yeah, I agree.
The version of events.
Yeah, I agree. Why didn't they? I don't know. But here's another thing, because that's for the police now to reinvestigate, and for those police officers that were there at the scene that night who allowed everyone to go home, because from my understanding it, and I think you've read a recent thing, so we're both like one each. I wouldn't have thought that they'd have let anybody at the scene go home that night until they'd taken a statement from them.
Especially with what's happened.
Two people just died.
Exactly.
I don't know. But here's another thing. So let's count up with nose down there. You've got Steve Lane, Pink Parrot driver, Jack Maruniak, Dave Maruniak, Richard Draycott, Nigel Curtis. That's 5 of them. We've not even gone on to the 2 fitters that took the ladder away. They took the ladder away while Richard's in there. That's 5. That's 7 people.
You mean took the ladder away, Ian?
But anyway, let me just finish this. So that's 7, and I think there's more. Why didn't any of those, even Steve Lane, who was recently his boss, Mark Scholes, sent me an email recently saying Steve watched it all roll out, okay? Apparently now he was stood at the back of his lorry. I'm sure he's told solicitors, because my solicitor spoke to him earlier this year, that he was in his cab. But anyway, so with all these people at the scene, Richard Draycott's not seen for 11 minutes, 32 seconds. Why didn't one of those ring 999?
Yeah.
Why? Why did they feel the need to come to the office? I say this in my opinion. Something happened in the mixing shed that night. I do not know. I have speculated, and I'm going to apologise for saying the word murder. It's wrong. I'm going to take that back.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make this public now. But they were killed, We don't know how they was killed. They were killed, weren't they? How else? They died. Tragically, they died. Killed, died. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But I'll say this. In 11 minutes, 33 seconds, or even after 10 seconds, I think someone just press 999 on their mobile.
Question. Answer to and more, but people, I don't know.
Well, we do need the answers. In this great country, I think the public demand answers. We need to know what happened. I can't move on with my life. I'm sure the deceased families would want to know. The narrative, how it stands, just is not right.
Not. And not for anybody, people in difficulty or whatever, to raise an alarm. How long before the alarm was raised at the office did you say?
Well, let's say by the time he got up there, 11 minutes later, his face spotted. 12 minutes. What chance did there stand? If it happened, as Richard said, when he backed his tanker in that mixing shed, what happened? Now, I've not wanted to say this, but again, people have got to look at it, and I've been told, because I'm putting these posts on no remorse. Nobody knows how we feel. We're all caring people, but look, they've been framed. What do they want me to do? Lie down? These people who were down there have been messaging me, Nicky Maruniak, Mike Maruniak on Facebook. They're hailing abuse at me, telling me I'm a rapist, I'm a murderer. I've been shagging my daughter's friend. I've been shagging my personal assistant and more. So you imagine this, which has got nothing to do with why two people died in a tank, by the way. It didn't matter if I was gassing over, which isn't true, by the way. What has that got to do with how these two men drowned in a tank? Well, let me tell you what they've said. And I've captured this because I've allowed them. I've not blocked them. I've allowed them. They're still doing it today. I've allowed them to hail abuse my way because you know what they say at the end? Move on, Ian. They basically call me Jack the Ripper. But then at the end of the message, they say, quite nicely, move on, Ian. Why? I'll tell you why. Because they don't want this. What's coming? Because I'm not going to rest until we all know what happened in the mixing shed that night, tragically, 22nd of December, 2016. We all need to know, Tony. You need to know. Everyone in this country. The world needs to know.
Ian, I think what you tell me, the version of events, it's really horrific, and what you're saying, a miscarriage of justice. But your company, Greenfeeds, was found guilty of corporate manslaughter.
Indeed, as it stands.
And your wife, Gillian, was sentenced to 13 years in prison.
17, reduced to 13 because it taken a long time to get to court.
Yourself, 20 months.
20 months.
Your transport, the third man, transport manager.
Yeah, it was transport general manager.
He was 12 months and obviously suspended. For 2 years. 17 years, obviously reduced to 13. I don't know exactly how at that day, how you obviously felt when you, what's gone on, and you're saying, how does this stand up in court? How does this deal with? And did you have any inkling at all? Did your solicitors, barristers, did anyone
no, all the way through,
take a bag with you or whatever?
No, all the way through, because there was no evidence against my wife.
You didn't think any of it was going to stand,
Not at all, because don't forget, the first police statements never mentioned my wife at all. It took them, and it's all within the perjury report, it took them round about a year to 2 years for people to go back to the police to then start mentioning my wife. And in fact, Nicky Maruniak herself made 6 police statements. And she's recently said to me, on these messages, which I've welcomed because it's all evidence for me, that she had to because there's so much to tell them. Well, let me tell you, wouldn't you think if my wife were this evil person, she'd have mentioned it immediately? But let me tell you, she didn't. It took her until her last police statement to mention my wife in any bad way. And in fact, in court, she confirmed how kind my wife was to her, who paid her when she'd hurt her back when she was off work sick, who gave her free diesel, who took her out for meals. So my wife's doing all this. And then she says in her last police statement these horrible things about her wife. Let me tell you what we've also got. We've got all the unused evidence from the police. We've got text messages between the family. And there's messages in there to each other saying, in 2017, that they're going to pin it on us. The messages. So I think this is what happened later with change of statements. And a further text, there was one saying, they're going to make sure that we're never going to be happy again. Oh, they succeeded. Short term.
18 years.
They got what they wanted. Short term. But here's the thing with liars. Lies are there to be unturned. And I'm not the sort of person that's ever going to rest until these people brought before our courts and made to pay for their crimes, whether it be perjury, whether it be perverting the course of justice, whether it be other crimes. I will not rest until this happens. And so, sticking with the night itself, when Richard Draycott's gone to the office and alerted the people, the honest people in the office, now we've got honest versions now coming out of what happened afterwards on 12 minutes on arriving at the scene. And so, we can all see now, we've got it on the CCTV, you see my son sprints to the scene, not half-hearted like you've got Jack Maruniak scurrying away when he was on his phone. No, he's absolutely running. And what's he running on here in? Someone's in a tank, Gavin's in a tank, Gavin and Nathan's in a tank. That was enough for him to run like Usain Bolt down there to the scene. Now, if you'd have thought this was common practice, wouldn't you just say, and so what? What's up, Richard? No. This caused him so much alarm to sprint to the scene. What happened when he got to the scene? He couldn't believe it. The free flow valve on the tanker was closed. And so he screamed, open the fucking valve. The valve's opened, the liquid comes running out. It's not set like concrete, it's now running out. It then goes up the ladder, moves Nigel Curtis aside, who's got his phone on the torch looking in, and strips down to his thermals and shouts for a ladder. A ladder's then given to him by Dave Maruniak, and he puts it in the tanker. And he goes in the tanker, and he tries how many times, to try to pull Gavin up out of the liquid, but he's so heavy laden with the porridge that he couldn't, and it's been too long anyway. When someone's limp, excuse the pun, it's a dead weight, and it was impossible. Dave Maruniak then climbed up the ladder and peered in and said to Lance, leave them, youth, they're fucking dead. Now, I knew this at the time. I knew it up till 5 years until we got the CCTV, until that's when we discovered it was him there at the scene. And I could never understand on God's earth why someone would want to assist saving these two men. Because you can't say they're dead. The emergency services, when they finally arrived, they didn't just stand there and say, leave them, they're dead. No. They tried to resuscitate them. They tried to do what they do. So we know this happened, and then they decided then, because it's absolutely pitch black in the tank, by the way, you can't see in these tankers. So they decided to take the tank out of the mixing shed to try and get some light, which is diminishing from the lights outside into the tankers. And at this point, everyone's down there at the scene. Jake Welsh, then, who's doing the building, is washing the mixer out and he's gone into the office, and there's just my wife in the office, hysterical, crying her eyes out. And he says, and she tells him what's happened. He says, well, I'll get the still saw, I'll go and cut them out. So Jake runs down the yard to the tanker. Stuart Brown, by the way, at this point is now on a mobile phone down there talking to the emergency services. And you can hear this because I've heard it in court. I didn't hear it till the first time. You can hear him talk to them, and you can hear as Jake gets there. I spoke to Jake about this afterwards and others. And you can hear Dave Maruniak saying, no, you can't, there's fumes. Now he's stopping Jake, trying to get the still saw off him, to stop Jake cutting holes in the tank to try to save them. What is that all about? He's trying to prevent a rescue.
From what are we in?
I'm pleased you said that, Tony, because When the police arrived at the scene, they surprisingly, astonishingly, forgot to turn their body cams on down there at the scene of two men who just drowned in a tank. They did have them on in the office all the time. They was in the office, whether it was in the main office downstairs, whether it was the meeting room, you name it, the police had them on there. But they didn't down there at the scene. Now, I've picked out lots of evidence that I've found this year from the body cams in the offices. There's always evidence, there's clues everywhere. Now, had they had them on down at the scene when they arrived, I bet you bottom dollar I'd have picked out from what these people were saying to the police something that had given me clues to what happened. I'm going to quote here the chief constable of Manchester Police of what he has said in the past. And it's the golden rule. It's the Bible of policing. ABC. When you arrive at any scene, assume nothing, believe nobody, and check everything. Okay? What did the police do in my case? They arrived at the scene. They forgot to turn the body cams on. They didn't secure the scene. They believed everybody down at the scene because, of course, now whatever happened in that mixie shed, they've now had to make up a story, haven't they? They've had to do. They've had to say something. So they believed them and they've checked nothing. Absolutely nothing. That tanker the next day was mine to use again. Less than 24 hours. The police came up to the officers and we've got it all on body cam.
Okay.
Carry on. So they've got the body cams in the office. And that night, they left a lady police officer in the offices to guard the paperwork, which the next day we tried desperately to get hold of Nikki Maruniak because she wouldn't answer the phone. The lady police officer that stayed in the main office will confirm this. She wouldn't answer the phone. Finally, I got hold of her mother. I said, Terry, would Nikki just come down to give him all the health and safety information? I said, this is not our Nikki's fault. Immediately, she's going for defence, where I wasn't accusing Nikki of anything. We don't know why they've died. We just wanted all the risk assessments to give to the police. She finally came down and said to the police, because my daughter was in the office, that she didn't do health and safety, she'd fill calendars in. But anyway, so we've got the police not secured the scene. The next day, at less than 24 hours later, at 4 o'clock, I'm given the green light by the health and safety executive. The police, by the way, had gone by lunchtime on the day. Two plainclothes guys came down in a dark car, unmarked car, long coats on. My solicitor will confirm this. I was sat in the kitchen talking to him at 12 o'clock that day. They came down, went down to the scene, came back up, opened the staff canteen door and said, who's Lance? Lance was in there with me, my son. And he went out into the foyer and stood with them. And they said, you're a very foolish man to do what you did, but you're very brave. Well, this was the police officers, what they said on the day. They then disappeared. The police had no interest in the tank whatsoever, and they left the health and safety executive there to go through the paperwork, to look at risk assessments. And they didn't know what happened, because we've got statements by Nigel Curtis, actually, his first police statement, saying they died unknown. It's in his statement. He said, could they have fallen in? That's Nigel Curtis' first police statement. I've gone back a little bit. That's something else he said. So approximately 4 o'clock, the health and safety executive had me into the main office. One was sat where Nikki sits and one was sat where Alex sits. And they said to me, Ian, do people go into tankers? Immediate reaction, no. Will you sign this? And this was to confirm, because we didn't know how they died, that no one would lean or look into the tanker, because we've had now invented the word fumes, something you've just said there. Fumes, harmful gases. Of course I signed this, and off I went. I didn't want to use the tanker ever again. Two people have just died. We parked it into the paddock, so the police weren't interested in it. Then moved it over to my friend's business premises around the corner from me, and it was stood in a field. And I think it was there for about 6 months before the police finally took it away. So the police never checked for any gases or fumes. In the case, you'll all see from the press reports, toxic fumes was said by the prosecution, harmful gases. It's for speculation. They drowned. That's the coroner's report. And oh, by the way, because, look, my wife's in jail. I say she's been free. So, of course, I'm going to come out with these things. I wish I didn't have to say this. And I've had to do it since September. Mrs. Rawson herself. Well, no, I'm not going to talk about that. Toxicology report says that Gavin had both cannabis and cocaine in his system. I can't alter this, can I? It's facts. Should I hold it back? I don't believe so. Do I want to say it? Of course I don't. But it's a fact.
I get it, but we've got to also respect. We don't want to upset them.
We have, and I'm sorry for just mentioning that name.
No, it's not Ian, and I get you frustration. See, you fight for your wife, and I get it. And but also we've got to listen. I'm the same. I'd back my wife to the hills. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And you're trying to do that, but also, okay, facts are facts, and coroners just, whatever. But we've got to respect the family.
We have.
And listen, I'm behind you with fighting for justice for your wife. But we've got to remember.
We have. We have indeed. But that is a fact, and I have to say it.
Yeah, okay.
I have been told by other people, bring the toxicology report, but I don't want to do that. It's a fact. So it just brings back to whatever reason. We don't know what happened in the mixing shed. And I'm saying that throughout all of this. We don't know. But did Gavin go in first because he wasn't of, can I say, sound mind because of these books? I don't know. And I don't want you to comment because we don't want to get nobody in trouble. But these are things that the police needed to investigate, and they didn't. When they got that toxicology report, wouldn't you thought that they'd have questions to ask? Who gave them these drugs? We know something was handed to Nigel Curtis. We know he went over to the conifers and he's smoking something. Who did? I could go on to accusing, I can. I'm going to stop short at this because we just want to know what happened in the mixing shed that night. We know what my son did. Now, let me tell you something else about my son. Because I went to the Maruniak's house a few nights after, and I've been suspicious immediately, I recorded that meeting. I was asked to go there. There was Terry Maruniak there, Jack Maruniak, Mike Maruniak, and Dave come later. And we're talking through this. And then Dave said a very strange thing, and I didn't understand it. He said, Ian, I had to ring Nigel. Your Lance didn't get in tank. What a strange thing to say. And Terry said he didn't get his shoes wet. It's been said again about me which is, I'm lovely. I'm capturing all these little things they're doing. It's their words. So in 2017, because this has been said and we don't know what's happened in the mixing shed, I don't know whether they were lying or telling the truth. So I had a few fallouts with my son. And it led to the following year. My son got married in the March 2017. And I couldn't, wife and I was absolutely distraught with this. I'm getting people now starting changing statements. And at the wedding, I was up here in the Lake District. I couldn't step up. I had to go to, I think it was 8 o'clock I left the wedding. That's how much it bothered me. The following year, when my daughter-in-law, she was pregnant, and her waters broke, and she went in, Lance took her on the Thursday night to Queen's Medical Centre. And the next day, he went to her, and he went into the labour suite, and he went to hold her hand, and he had a full-on stroke, a cerebral bleed to the brain, a major stroke. And it was so severe that they had to have a police escort from Queen's Medical Centre to City Hospital in Nottingham. And he could have died. And I say it was through stress, through not being able to save the man, and hurtful things said to him were all fabricated lies. And in fact, I didn't know this, but he actually, before his grandson was born, went down Kelly, which we all know it's a local, some woods near us, And he was going to kill himself. Now, this wasn't through guilt of people entering tankers. This was through not being able to save them men, because he tried so desperately to do this. Now, when I arrived to City Hospital on the Saturday, the next day, I went with him to have a shower. And I remember passing him his roll-on deodorant. He put it in his mouth. Now, my son could have died. And 2 people have died, tragically. But he tried to save them. Had he been made aware on 30 seconds or a minute, and he'd have got down there and opened that valve, he would have saved them. Not only that, if the driver, there's 2 drivers there, and all of them knew this, if they'd have started that pump up and opened the valve on the pump, forget it coming out free flow like your bath, that tanker would have emptied in seconds, and they all knew this. Why didn't they turn the pump on? Why? Why didn't they turn the pump on? Why? These are questions. This is police work. I've been in business my entire life. Employed a lot of people. Paid a lot of taxes. I believe that I demand the right for the police to do some honest policing and find out what happened in the mixing shed that night. Because it just doesn't stack up. Nothing what we're talking about stacks up. None of it. We had, after those 5 people, when I come to my wife's main accuser, only accuser if you like. Now, this young fellow had left the business in November 2016. His name's Robin Neve. In September 2016, my wife was down there doing the wages. She used to do the wages with Aaron and go over chasing some money, actually. Money due in. And there was a call came into the office from Robin's mother. Robin worked out into the yard. And she said, she got onto my wife. She asked to be put on to Gillian. And she said, can you stop them bullying Robin in the yard? And so Gillian thought, we'll get Dave and Michael. They're the core people. They've worked for me for decades. They're the people that run the yard. And she asked them if they knew about this. And they both smirked and denied it. Look, we've got all the records from Robin, and we've got his doctor's records saying that he's being bullied in the yard. This doesn't say my wife. We've got a resignation letter from Robin actually saying this. He actually thanked both my wife and I for giving him the opportunity to work for us. We've got texts where when he was off sick in the October, my wife's messaging him in. Saying, would you like to meet for a coffee, Robin? Discuss this. Now, we've got message from him saying, don't send anybody from the yard to my house. Now, none of this does it sound like my wife that's being horrible to him? Been horrible? No? Okay. Now, he come to court and he claimed that it was my wife that was making him go into these tankers. Bearing in mind, my wife had 150 days off in 2016 with me. And he claimed that it was my wife, and this isn't word for words, but the prosecution barrister talked him through this. And I thought at any moment now he's going to throw down his paperwork and say to the judge, this trial stops. Because I thought the things he was putting to Robin, the transcripts are there for any legal person to read. And it wasn't word for word like this, but you could hear a pin drop in that court. And he led him through basically saying something like, so Mrs. Levis would drag you down to that tank. And he just said, yes. And Mrs. Levis would drag you up them ladders. Yes. And Mrs. Levis would hold your head under those into that tanker. Yes. And he was saying these things that was absolutely unbelievable to anyone to listen to. And I thought that the prosecution barrister was going to stop it there and then. So this is how the prosecution talked him through, and he claimed that my wife would sit with nothing better to do, looking at the CCTV screen, watching him work. And if he wasn't working, he's actually said this too. He said that we took £1,500 off him. Oh, never been taken out his wages? So, another lie. He purged himself in the highest degree, this man. So, when it came to the defence and the turn to cross-examine him, it was very strange because none of these people who claimed they was going in tanks ever mentioned their daily, weekly timesheets from the yard that they had to fill in.
Job sheet.
A job sheet. What they did. So on Robbins, all of his going back through 2016, we had them, and the defence barrister put to him, but Robin, it doesn't say that you ever went into a tanker on here. And he said, you won't put it down, would you? So that was what the judge was thinking. Heaven knows.
And from there on, is that when the judge is not the jury, or?
Well, what are the jury thinking with all this? So it was put to him about the resignation letter. He says, well, you'd just put that down, wouldn't you? So it blew me away. The whole trial blew me away. So that's Robin Neve. You've got the two fitters. One of them never made a police statement. Martin White. He claimed that he was over in the paddock, 1,000 yards away, having a crafty fag. He is indeed seen going to his car, I think putting something in his car. He goes over the paddock for a fag. Let me tell you, because as we know it's him walking with a ladder, that fag must have been one drag. And he came back out. He went up there to give himself an alibi, didn't he? Take him away from the scene, because it's him. He's factually seen. He's been identified by the solicitors this year from the CCTV footage. And that CCTV report has been with the police now for some months. So it proves that it's him. The description of his clothes and going to his car. It's him. Martin White never gave a police statement. Mick Jury, the other fitter, carrying the ladder, all seen on that CCTV clip. There's one clip that I've shown. You can see him carrying the ladder. Now, he comes to court and he just hurls abuse. His police statement says that, bearing in mind he's a fitter, that's what he does, mechanic, fitter. Came to court telling his 35 years experience working on the oil rigs and so forth and things like this. Very proud of what he's done. His police statement said that I had broken roller shutter doors. Well, isn't that his job to fix them? So he claimed that it wasn't him at the scene. Bearing in mind, he wasn't asked, actually, about the ladder. No one was asked about the ladder in the trial because we only had the 2-hour Paul copy, and it wasn't until last November, when I was in jail, that my nephew discovered it was the two fitters and they was carrying a ladder away from the scene. But he claimed that he was in his workshop working, so he's not at the scene. So you've got the two fitters now left the scene that walked out of the mixing shed with Dave Maruniak. They've left the scene. They know two men were either drowning or drowned at the time they exited that mixing shed. One's gone to the paddock, out the way, and one's gone to his workshop. Mick Jury claimed that he didn't know nothing happened until he seen people running past the front of his workshop. Let me tell you, the workshop's right up the far end of the site on the right-hand side, and anybody, if they passed from the front of his workshop, had to be coming from the fields. So that was something else nonsense that he said. He was made alert. He knew all the time because he was there and he carried the ladder away. That's covered the two fitters. We've covered Robin Neve, who'd left, and he's come and purged himself in the highest degree. There is the health and safety advisor that I employed. Now, she come to court, and as you probably gather now, all I do is make confectionery blend, which we called at the end of it, Green Fees blend. She come to court and claimed that she was happy to take my money on a monthly retainer, by the way. She claimed that she didn't know around tankers. Well, that's all I do. We took her on, actually, because we was after a Britvic contract up in Leeds. We did some other Britvic sites, but we wanted this contract. As you can all imagine, Britvic is a liquid. Juice, fantastic, loaded with sugars. You know, if you look at juice products, they could be, I'm selling my product to 40% dry matter. If you've got a juice, you could be even up there, up to 20% dry matter. Energy source, brilliant material or a base for making my product. So we took her on because Britvic actually came to site to do their audit. And on the day they came around site, they was happy with everything, by the way. You can imagine all these blue chip companies that I did business with, as you mentioned, Coca-Cola, Britvic, you name them, Bakkavor, we've named all the breweries up here. You name a blue chip company and I've done business with them. So we had contracts with all these companies. They all came to audit my site. If I'd got no health and safety, I wouldn't have got the contract. But on this particular day with Britvic, in the foyer is where the accident book is kept, and it's on the table there. I'm not involved with none of this, by the way. I didn't even meet the people from Britvic. It was Martin Vardy who showed them around the site on this day to try and get this contract. The accident book to drop down the back of the cabinet, and there's nothing in there to hide at all. And so they wanted us to get some exterior help again. I used to use Peninsula before we had Sam Ramage, and we had a 5-year contract with them after the death in 2005. And so it was just a short break, and then they said, get some external help again. So we got Sam Ramage in, and she went to do an audit to the Britvic site and to correct everything about the accident, but to get the contract. And indeed, we got the contract. Now, when she's in court giving her evidence, she said under cross-examination, she didn't know where she went. She said it could have been in Birmingham. It was a long time ago. It could even have been here in Leicester. She purged herself. Now, let me tell you, I can't remember, and I've not mentioned this before. A bit later on, and I don't know what part it was, the prosecution barrister himself mentioned the accident book and the Britvic job. So they knew knowledge of this, didn't they? But they was happy for her to say, under cross-examination early in the trial, she didn't know where she was. You know, I thought, what's happened to openness and fairness? Because we've got prosecution knowing where she went, but happy to keep his mouth shut, but mention it later, the accident book and the Britvic job. I think that says it all.
From there on in, they're all sentenced. I know you're going first, I said it on a weekly basis.
Can I just stop you, Tony?
Come on.
So I don't want to move on, but there's something that I need to also cover.
Go on.
Now we've talked about the prosecution barrister. When he was talking about the scene and what happened from the Jack and Ori side of things, the storytelling, he actually referred to my son, the only rescuer apart from Jake Walsh who come the still saw. He referred to him as Glenn. This was under intense cross-examination of my wife, who he had on the stand for 3 days. This is the woman that he had on the stand for 3 days, who had no part of my business, and he had a breaking down. The judge actually allowed her to go out for a break, so he's got up there for 3 days. Now he's talking about this person, and he then starts talking about Glenn. So my wife says, "Excuse me, who's Glenn?" He carried on because he's very stern when he talks at you and he's good at his job. And she said again, "Excuse me, sir, could you tell me who Glenn is?" He says, "Can you answer my questions, Mrs. Leavers?" And he carried on. So he didn't want my son being recognised as a rescuer, as an hero. Mysteriously, people listen to say, "Well, why didn't you defence correct him?" I do not know. Well, this is the prosecution barrister. Now, here's the thing I've just said. He had my wife on there for 3 days. A person who had no role within my company whatsoever. 3 days. Do you know how long he had a co-defendant on the stand for? Half a day, couple of hours. I think this says it all, don't it? Do we think it's the corruptest case ever in this country? I'd say so. Saying this live to you now, I've just thought about that one. A couple of hours Stuart Brown was under cross-examination. This was the general manager, the transport manager, who ran my business for me, whilst we took 150 days off at least that year. I'd not been in the business actually until the 22nd of December, since September that year. The reason being this, and why did I set Stuart Brown on? In 2015, I had an MRI scan. I still got the text now from my family, from my daughter. They was worried that I was losing my memory. And so I paid private, went to the Park Hospital, had an MRI scan. The neurosurgeon rang me and he gave me advice as to what it was. He says, you've got a perfectly good brain, an healthy brain, but it's the stress. So I decided to change things. Hence the reason for Aaron Shelley, who I was training to take over my role to run the art business. Took a step back. So the wife and I travelled. We went around Europe. We stayed in our home in Spain. We did a lot of things to take ourselves away from the business. We was happy with what was happening. We'd got Stuart Brown there, a man of 40 years experience within the transport industry, to train my son. We've got Aaron Shelley, very intelligent accountant, to look after the accountancy side of things. We've got Alex Fortune, fantastic sales and personal assistant. She could win contracts better than me. She had that girl touch. Sometimes it works. I'm trying to be chauvinist. I'm speaking for the ladies here. They're brilliant. So what part of my wife got in that business? No one mentioned her for over up to a year or 2 years. Then the police allowed them to go back to change statements. They actually changed statements to build a case against my wife. I think it says it all. It stinks.
I mean, telling me that, it does sound like it stinks. But now, like I say, your wife is currently serving sentence. I understand she deserves, and saying that, I sort of agree, but then say I think it's crazy, absolutely crazy. So you visit your wife on a weekly basis. What prison she's serving at the moment?
She's in one near Stafford Stone. She's in Drake Hall, ladies jail. Ladies don't have no segregation for different. Have you rapists, murderers, drug dealers, you name what? They're all in there together. But my wife, being my wife, who I say it publicly, she's in my book as this. I call her Mother Teresa. She's the most caring, kindest person on this earth. There's nobody. There will be people who will equal her. Nikki Maruniak herself has confirmed this in court, but then chose in her last statement her abuse of my wife, as she has done on Facebook messages recently. Well, I don't block them. I welcome these because it's all damning evidence against them, proving that they are liars. So my wife's in there, and there was one lady that lost her daughter. Now, my wife always, as you can imagine, she kept her door shut. On that night, her door was open, and she continued to go in to look after her. Another lady, only last week, my wife rang me, I think, was it Sunday last week? I forget the night. She was absolutely heartbroken. One lady has just found out that her granddaughter's got a tumour. And that's my wife. She cares for absolutely everyone. And I think everyone in that jail will know her. And also I need to say hello to Steph up here, Gillian's, who worked with Gillian in the gym. Gillian said, hello, Steph. Steph's a Scouser that's recently been released. I had another lady, Tina, actually found me on TikTok for one of my posts. I think she's from Wakefield. She's actually said hello to Gillian, and Gillian says, if you hear this, Tina, hello back. And you'll get this from ladies all over the country. The prison officers themselves know how kind and caring my wife is. And so, yeah, that's my wife. I have just touched on that. I have got a book about to be released. It's called The Court of Lies. I think it says it all.
Is that available now on any? It
will be available on Amazon very soon. We have just gone through the drafts with my author. She's coming to see me again next week, and this will be released before Christmas. Any profits from that book, because I'm sure a lot of people want to hear more what I've said than
What's the book
tonight.
Called?
A Court of Lies.
So Ian, obviously, I know you're fighting.
But I've just said that, and also I want to just say, any profits from that will go to rheumatoid arthritis, which my daughter's had from the age of 7, and Alzheimer's. So 2 charities where every single penny, because I've seen how it's destroyed my daughter's life. She's a cripple. She has more operations than you could ever count, and I saw the most terrible disease, Alzheimer's, and what it did to my mother-in-law. And I don't wish that. No, I don't wish it. It is an absolutely horrendous, terrible disease. Not only for the families of people that get this.
Two great charities that obviously you're gonna
Mean much to me.
it's close to your heart, and I think it's fantastic that you're gonna donate Ethan from the book to them two great charities. It's absolutely. But Ian, I know you're fighting for a retrial, and you've already stated as of justice. In your eyes, Ian, is anybody you can reach out to out there on what you're needing?
Yeah, well, I believe this, Tony. Listen, I've asked a lot of people to write into the Chief Constable himself, Rob Nixon at Leicestershire Police, and they've done so. And Rob is now engaging, because lots of people have sent me emails that his assistant, Chris, has sent back. And I'm actually mentioning a police name, which I don't think I'm doing wrong with this, because I've said it publicly, people to write to Rob. And I don't also mind, I will also say the Detective Spectre that's got the page report, who is working with, because people are writing to him, is Chris Baker. They've got the page report. They're looking at that. So I don't think there's a lot more need to write to Mr. Nixon anymore. But I do need support, because you mentioned there a retrial. I do need a lot of support from my local MP. My local MP's front bench, Robert Jenrick, he is the MP for Newark. And I have written to him initially when I came out of jail, and for whatever reason, Robert hasn't picked this up. Now, I believe your local MP should listen to your concerns. So I've sent you over an email earlier, Tony, with Rob's email address on, so he's aware that what we're doing now. If you could put his email address onto your podcast, I just want people. Please, I really thank you for that. If people from Liverpool would kindly write to Rob Jenrick and just ask him to meet me, to listen to all the evidence that I've got. And I've got more evidence that I've spoke about tonight. I have got evidence of drug crime, overwhelming evidence that the police have got, and I just need this. I need my local MP to support me.
It's that, like any MP, that that's what you want some backing, or want support, basically.
That's what I need. That's all I need. I want support from my local MP. I want him to listen to me. I want him to meet me. Let's have a coffee. Listen to my concerns. Look, and at the end of that, if he says, Ian, I can't do nothing for you, so be it. At least I will understand, and we'll have met, and we'll have discussed this. I've met him before. He knows my views on Brexit. I did keep him on my doorstep in 2016, but we won't go into that. And so, yeah, that's what I need from Rob Jenrick.
Certainly put that in the.
Thank you very much,
Ian. This might be a bit of a question for you, but what is in the pipeline for Ian Leavers? I know you're going to keep fighting. I know you're going to.
This is as far as I can see until justice is served and we can finally lay both Gavin and Nathan to rest. I think the whole country owes it to them at this moment in time. They're lost souls, because they are not at rest. And I'm not talking wrong here. Something happened in the mixing shed that night. We need to get to the bottom of it. They need finally to be laid to rest. And we dearly want to go to their graves to lay flowers and pay our respects. That's as far as I can see until this is done. And then look, when this is finally over, we had semi-retired. I want my wife back home. And we do want either a retrial or my wife's conviction quashing entirely, which I believe it should be. And then we are going to travel the world and finally enjoy the rest of the time we've got together.
Ian, we wish you all a luck in regards to the retrial and stuff. And I want to just say, powerful podcast in regards to exactly what happened. The retrial and stuff. sharing the good with us.
Thank you. Can I just say some things about Scarces?
Go on, mate. Of course you can. Of course you can.
And so, Scarces, Scarce people, going back to the day, because I'm an old man now. I think it was 1978. Check it out, guys, people of my age. I think it was the last match of the season, because I'm a Forest fan. I was up here, night match, and I'm sure it was the last match of the season, on the Barton supporters bus from Nottingham with my girlfriend from school, actually. And somehow we got put in the end with the Scarces next. I forget what end I was, next to the Forest fans, and we had to be escorted through by our good and gracious police. And as they took us through, well, we had some abuse hurled at us. And I'm going to say this, so you all not be like what I'm going to say until I correct it. I hated Scarces. And then, as I got a little bit older, as you know, we tended to have a lot of League Cups against Liverpool, and we'd be coming down the M1, and then they'd join from the M6, and you'd get down there to Wembley. And as a young man, yeah, there might be a few little fights going up and what have you, but I hated Scarces. I hated how they talk. I hated everything about them. Well, let me tell you, when I finished my 2 weeks in Leicester and got moved to Ramby in Nottinghamshire, a Category C jail, I met Scarces. And the first person, when I was on the first 2 weeks on the induction unit on Wands, was John. And John's a Scarceller. And let me tell you, that people knew of my case, and even talking to you guys now, and I know you're impartial, but this Scarcer man, he was on the server and he called out your numbers, and whenever I got there, he said, give E my food, give E mine, and he did everything for me. He'd be knocking on my cell door, he'd be bringing towels, he'd be bringing blankets, he'd have me into his room, he'd give me his biscuits, he'd give me his porridge. What he did, then there was another one, Jay, with him as well there. So I'd got two great lads on those first 2 weeks. I was only there 2 weeks. Let me tell you, when Mr. Reeves come to fetch me to take me over to House Block 5, they come and embrace me, and they give me their details. Now, I'm sorry, guys. I very apologise. I'm going to find the book. I've got your details at home, but for the life of me, I can't find it at this moment in time. So I can't remember your second names to say it out loud. I will find it. And so when I went over to Fives, John had already told me that Neil would be there, and another great Scarcer. And so then there was Sam, and there was Josh. Now, Sam and Josh, those two lads would we used to run around the perimeter fence. I called it Super 10. 10 laps was 5 kilometres. So I got the lads into doing a lot of running, and we'd have our watches on and we'd time it. So I'd got Sam into running. I got Josh into running. I had a little bad experience thinking I'd got bed bugs. I just got a bit of paranoia. And so I went up onto twos, and I took no clothes with me. And Josh was walking around the path with me and says, E, you can have any of my clothes. That's the warmth of Scarces. Then there was another lad, I forget his name, was out on the workyard there. And I'll know what I mean. Bodybuilder sort of guy. He'd just come in, and big guy. And I said to him, you know what, pal? I said, I fucking hate Scarces. And he stood back, he took us, I says, but you're the salt of the earth. And like I told when we first spoke, you remember how warm it is to hear a Scarces accent. A lot of people will disagree.
We got a lot of, what's the name, bad press and that.
Oh, indeed.
They're all good people, mate.
They're the most kindest people I've ever met. There was another one in there, Paul, who was a lifer on a recall. And when I was running around the perimeter fence, he used to shout to me, E, how many laps? Then he'd shout, how's your beard? I used to. You guys, at that time, my wife was 60, and I used to have a little chuckle to myself. So, but whenever Paul saw me, when anybody from Liverpool saw me, they would always ask about Gillian. Always, always, always. So, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I'm 60 years of age now, nearly 61, and the people of Liverpool, the kindest people in this country. Yeah, it's true.
Well, Ian, like I say, mate, it's been a powerful podcast, mate, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
With everything, and thanks for sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Thank you very much, Terry. Thanks, Chris. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.
This week's episode is sponsored by Sorb Events Limited. They provide Sorb football, battle tag archery, UV dodgeball, sports days events, inflatable assault courses, plus many, many more activities coming soon. Ideal for sports teams, presentations, birthday parties, stag and hen parties, corporate events, school, and half-term summer camps, any occasions. Give them a follow and use the code The Good, The Bad and The Ugly Podcast for 10% off your first booking. The Good, The Bad and The Ugly Podcast with Tony Morell.